all to this session where Petra will be talking about her research. And I think most of you probably know Petra from last year's social simulation conference in Mainz, where she did a fantastic job of hosting. Today Petra will be talking to us about artificial intelligence and agent-based modeling. And I think it's in public policies, scientists have always wanted to kind of share their expertise and aid in public policy implementations, and it is the same for social simulation and agent-based modeling, and the same for AI. However, with these new tools that would aid policy decision making, I think that option has been increasingly attractive for policymakers, because, you know, if you make the right decision, it's that's your glory. However, if you make the wrong decision, it's the algorithms that are to blame. So Petra is going to talk today about that connection, and will share her reflections on how social simulations and advanced segmentation in AI can aid policy decision making. What's the role of culture in it? And she will share her reflection on the grounds of an empirical study. So Petra, it is my pleasure to introduce you, and I'm looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, thank you very much for this nice introduction, Patricia. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Flaminio, for having me here and for doing a great social simulation week so far. I'm very happy that I can present my favorite project to you. I have a little bit bad conscience because it is not a ready-made simulation study yet. It is a big worldwide enterprise, and simulation is part of it. And I hope I can provide some bits and pieces which are useful. And I will now try to share my screen with you.
Before you start, Petra, can I just ask you a practical question? Would you like me to give you an indication of past time, and how much time would you like to devote for questions and answers in the end? 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
15 minutes would be perfect. And if you can alert me 5 minutes before.
Absolutely. Have a great talk.
That's great. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Very good. Yeah, so as you said, the title of my talk is Assessing Artificial Intelligence in Simulation. And just to do a little bit of expectation management first, Julia yesterday in her keynote talked about social expectations, and this is why you know that they are there. Maybe concerning this talk, what could you expect AI and social simulation? Maybe you expect something like that AI offers great calibration opportunity data for simulation, or that simulation can provide training data to improve AI. That is the usual way you discuss the connection between AI and social simulation. But it will be nothing of this kind. I will give you a completely different talk on the topic. I thought I would do this first, a kind of methodological talk about cross-fertilization between AI and simulation. But though this would be interesting and timely, I would rather like to talk about what are the advantages of our nice field. I want to talk about why simulation is a good idea and lay out some punchlines how to promote it. And I just want to use the topic area of AI to make this clear to you. So I will talk about AI assessing people, people assessing AI. This is a kind of mutual observation relationship we have here. And I want to talk to you about a specific project trying to manage this mutual observation. The project is called AI for Assessment, the AI Fora project. And you see here our usual suspects when we talk about advantages of social simulation, and I will talk a little bit about all of them and hope to show you in the end why simulation is the method of choice for our project. So first, AI assessing people. I thought I would show you as a starter the trailer of the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise. Maybe you know it. But then I thought, yes, maybe you know the movie, maybe you do not like Tom Cruise, and it would cost me 3 minutes of my talk, so I will not. But you can follow the link if you would like to see this trailer. It is about AI assessing people. It is about predictive government, predictive policing, and that is what is meant by this term AI assessing people. What you see is, you know maybe the examples very well, the Chinese social credit system, predictive policing, and job recruitment. It is done in child abuse prevention, it is done in unemployment prevention, and so on. Nowadays, AI technologies, especially machine learning, they are central for assessing and predicting human behavior. And it is assessing, and it is a kind of prognostic activity. And then there is automated decision making based on the social assessment, the social prognosis, what is implemented by these AI systems. They work with dynamic databases on individuals and their changing attributes. You see here this nice picture with these two Chinese police officers. This is from the city of Luoyang, and these are glasses with face recognition systems in them. And if they look at you, they then see your data and what you might or might not do in the future, whether you will become criminal in the next few seconds and so on. So this is a nice picture which was in the German newspaper Die Zeit a few weeks ago. Oh, why does it not work? There is a lot of AI use in policy and public administration as well. So it is not only there in China. I have listed here only a few anecdotal examples that you can see that it is everywhere. For example, in the Netherlands and in France, there are systems that detect fraud in social service provisions, especially concerning unemployment benefits. And they sort recipients into risk groups for future fraud. In Belgium, there are systems in place that look at the search behavior of unemployed people on websites and act accordingly. In Austria, Poland, and Estonia, there are systems that score unemployment people into categories. So categories like whether you are close to the job market, then you get no real training, professional training, because it's not necessary. Whether you are employable, then you will get training programs and professional development and also unemployment money. Or whether you are unemployable, then you will get just financial support. And these systems are in place assessing you concerning your individual data, and then profiling you, scoring you, and put you into one of these three groups, and you will then get the automated decision on the benefits you will receive. In the US, there are systems in place for trying to prevent child abuse. There are family screening tools. They have data on individuals and on households, and they score risk cases. And like in Minority Report, they act in advance. So before you have done anything, there will be social workers on your doorstep and suggesting some measures to take. So how does this work? In a second, why are people doing that? Why they are using AI for assessing people like that? The reasons behind is, first, it is cheaper, of course. You have fully automated public service agencies. Then it is supposed to be more rational, so more objective and more efficient. And how it is done using machine learning, and probably you know machine learning. It's just a short slide to explain for those who don't, that you need pictures, let's say, of dogs for training data, and they tell you what your output value should be, the pixels forming a dog picture, and then you have a neural network with many layers, and these layers act as filters, and starting from millions of inputs of signals, the net filters these inputs to the next layer, and it will give you a range of output values on the upper level. Maybe that is still a far cry from a dog, but now you can train your network. You see on which layer, which neurons contributed to a good, right solution and which were failures, and you can switch off the failures and promote the good ones. And with trial and error, you let the network learn how a dog looks like, and it will recognize a dog. This is exactly what happens to people in the social assessment areas. It is a training data exercise, again, individual level data on people with an attribute of interest, let's say a future champion in your company, and every individual in your database will get a score, how far it comes to this profile. And in a way, it is just statistical modeling as we are doing it, but on the individual level for each individual in the database. It is only statistics, of course, there's no guarantee, but maybe you will take action. You see in the middle here the picture of Paul Lukovic, whom you might know. Paul says that he knows better than you do whether you will divorce your partner in the next year, because he will look at your individual data, and the typical person divorcing in the next year is known to him, and he will give you a score how far away you are from this profile and the likelihood you will divorce your partner. So that's the way this is working. Of course, in such an approach, data is key. You need sufficient amounts of good training data, and this might be sensitive data, data on your health status, for example, for job recruitment, things like that. And you need a database on all individuals of interest. What is quite important here is this will be always past data. Yeah, so maybe your training data shows that most white males from Western countries have been recruited for technical jobs in big companies. And then you can think of my own profile. I am qualified, I want this job, but I am not the perfect candidate, and I will get a low score. So bias will be transported through this approach into the future based on past data and cementing profiles and decision-making on this scoring. You see here that that companies already try to work on that. No. So there's Amazon that took a recruitment tool from market, and predictive policing works very much against this bias in these social assessment tools, but it is there, of course. This chart was done by an artificial intelligence developer looking at a usual social assessment process. And you can see that there are many technical questions and issues about data. I won't go through this in detail, but there are questions about whether the data is legal, is ethical, when it is collected, how it is collected, and how the scores are calculated, and so on. So there are huge issues with these social assessment tools which have to be answered. Okay, let's go to the other side of the coin. When people assess AI, in fact, I have already done this a little bit. So this AI developer was assessing AI, was questioning AI and looking into the thing. This is what happens when people assess AI for a change. They ask, what are the impacts of AI-based social assessment? How will AI impact future societies? There are many initiatives for these types of technology assessment procedures, like, for example, this Volkswagen Foundation funding scheme, Artificial Intelligence and the Society of the Future. And there are many high-level initiatives on ethics of AI, of course, implemented on all sorts of governance boards, as you see. The idea is always that technology production is challenged for having bad AI, like biased AI, discriminating AI, not complicated enough AI, whatever. So these are the challenges posed. And in these technology assessment initiatives, there are huge issues as well. Yeah, so if you ask what are the impacts of AI-based social assessment for future societies, we have societies rather than one big world society, then you have to consider that context is indeed key. Yeah, so it will be different in the US than in Estonia. For example, in Germany, and I guess in most of your countries, the Chinese social credit system is a big emotional critical issue. Chinese citizens, they seem to think that it is rather a kind of sheltering, safeguarding, scaffolding structure, ensuring societal stability. So the context where this happens is very important. Then it is very much about the future, it is very much about values, and it is about what societal stakeholders would like to live in a society in. So our democratic systems, they have developed procedures for participatory technology assessment to assess techno-futures, as it is called, and for implementing ethical and social needs and values in AI systems. But current approaches are very slow and they are very disorganized. Yeah, so these high-level groups, they have their problems in doing that. This is what the project Ahrweiler is about. It is about this mutual assessment. AI assesses people, people assess AI, and try to improve things. The project is funded by the Volkswagen Foundation in this program, Artificial Intelligence and the Society of the Future. As a planning grant. For the full grant, we are currently in evaluation. You can have a look at our webpage. Martin Neumann, who is here in the audience, he is working on this project as well. The domain we chose for that project is public social services. And public social services is everything responding to human needs in a lifetime. Yeah, so from cradle to grave, so to speak, whatever the state can offer you in public service as a citizen. And this is a huge challenge area for many countries. As you know, there's a heavy pressure on scarce public resources. And in this area, AI use is very prominent in the moment in all types of countries. How this is organized, who is profiled as a legal recipient, as a deserving, as a needing recipient, is profiled, assessed by AI systems, and there is automated decision making. Who gets what? And of course, this has huge consequences for the individuals under these decisions, and delegating such decisions to machines raises issues about responsibility, accountability, quality of social decision making, and so on. Debates are very, very emotional and controversial because values are affected in that. So the main objective of our project is to understand the current status and the future options for AI-based social assessment and public service provision in order to create improved AI technology for social welfare systems. And as I said, this has something to do with values, with context, and getting a grip on questions about the future. We will work with empirical research, we will work with scenario simulations, and we will work with an experimental lab approach for co-design technology production. These are the research questions of the project. First, we will look in various countries at the current social assessment routines prior to any AI use, then at the same routines with AI use, what has changed, and how did policy, stakeholders, public discourse, institutions respond to it. These two questions are empirical questions, and we will use empirical research to answer them. And then we will look at how AI will change public service provision and the value systems in future, and what will be the policies supporting desirable and prevent harmful scenarios in these contexts. Last question is, and how would the technology, the algorithms look like that have these desirable scenarios involved? These are the research questions, and we have to deal with various challenges. First, the context challenge. That is the perceptions on these whole issues, as I said, vary between countries very much. And the question is, are there any unifying bedrock elements that we can have a kind of one model approach, or do we need as many models as we have countries? Are the values promoted somehow comparable or even unifiable? Because people in the moment talk about global AI governance. This would only be possible if there are general approaches to that. We will do in AI4 empirical case studies for cultural comparison and collect data on welfare systems in Germany, Estonia, Spain, India, China, and the US. And we will look at these issues, what is context specific and what is the same. Our case study countries, they have AI implemented for public social service provision, and they have partly existing projects on these issues. And we will look from a comparative framework starting from the nation state, because our interest is also in policy, as I said, and we look at the state as the common legal and administrative framework, but very much at the local stakeholder networks with our case study partners. Because values are very important in our project. In all of these countries, you have value frameworks. And if you do assessment, you work with dualities: deserving, non-deserving, needy, non-needy, high-performing, low-performing. And how these dualities work is rooted in these societal value frameworks. Therefore, we will look at stakeholders, at people promoting societal values in these contexts. And we will use a lot of participatory tools to get at the values, perspectives, opinions, attitudes, and so on. We will use Hofstede's, not Gertjan's, but his father's cultural dimension framework to do that and look at the cultural dimensions underlying these value frameworks. How does this work? A society with very strict categorization, hierarchies, power use, and so on, working on these dualities and assessing people, profiling people, deciding on who will get what, will be a completely different one from a society that promotes integration, networks, communication, equality, and so on. In the Hofstede dimensions, if you know this approach, these are called masculine and feminine societies. So these are dimensions in the framework. And you can score societies according to these dimensions. These are our 6 case study countries, and you see that they score differently in the masculinity dimension, but also in many other dimensions. It is very nice. You can compare our case study countries according to these dimensions and relate this to the approach taken to AI use in social assessment, both in this working with dualities and how machines take over in doing so. There are all kinds of approaches. Here's a different one where you can locate these case study countries on a cultural map, so to speak. Here are 2 dimensions. On the y-axis, you see traditional versus secular rational values, and on the x-axis, you see, sorry.
Oh, hello.
Can you hear me? Oh, I thought there was
yes, we can.
Light interruption. Okay. No, I just said the x-axis. You see values that are related to survival and self-expression, and you see here where the case study countries of the Ahrweiler project are located in that. In each of these case study countries, social science teams will work with computer science teams. The social science teams will investigate the cultural and social ethical axiom base of the value systems in place in this domain, social assessment for public welfare provision. And they will look at the actors and networks, adapting Hofstede's cultural dimension to the research realm. And they will use their local context for stakeholder analysis. The computer science people will investigate the technical base of AI implementation in social assessment, and they will look at the characteristics of the algorithms in place. We want to improve technology in the end, and in the moment you see a big gap between the societal discourse and technology production. And we will work with a participatory co-design lab approach where then our results will be taken up by the technology makers, the technology producers. The technology producers are Hello?
Now we hear you again.
Okay, okay. Yeah, sorry for that. You were gone suddenly. Do you see my screen still?
We see you.
Yeah.
But not your screen.
Okay. How about now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Very good. Okay. In this issue, public service provision, this is a very difficult issue because it is a conflict-prone area where there are many losers, people who won't get anything, minorities, vulnerable populations, and so on. We speak here of India, among others. Yeah, so these people, they have no standard representation committees, but it is important to have them in. We have a specific mechanism in that project to arrange for that. Because the danger is that they will not dare to speak up when we have these multi-stakeholder workshops in universities, for example, or in big companies or in public agencies where they might have difficult experiences with. So we work with the so-called safe spaces concept. These are places at network organizations specialized in intercultural and intersocietal communication. And we have a safe space in each of the case study countries where people are used to work with brokers, with networks, with boundary objects, and so on. And they support to switch between perspectives and intercultural contexts. Here we have a bundle of methodological resources to enable joint problem definition and solution, even if you have highly conflictual areas. And you see here a list of participatory methods. You might know some of them. And of course, participatory modeling of desired futures and societal scenarios is prominently among them. And this is what now is the simulation component of our project, because if you have such complex settings, cultural comparison, value, context, and so on, what you need is a good model. And you need scenario simulations because you want to look at desired futures that are created by multi-stakeholder approaches. So what you need is a realistic model that can represent the dynamics between society and AI technology in that case, and that can consider values and context. This is what we will do in AI Fora. And this is the simulation model we will use. It has a basic loop in it. The case studies are on all levels for calibration of the model. The model has agents identified by the case studies that are encouraged and incentivized by policy or user demand or scientific curiosity or any other observed incentive by case studies. And what agents are doing with each other is that they negotiate, co-create new AI assessment technology. Agents differ in cultural value patterns along the Hofstede dimensions, and they are differing in resources like power, money, reputation, knowledge, and so on. They are constrained by their specific context, environments, as advised by the case studies, and the technology performs something. It assesses people for their recipients' for social service provision, there's a feedback from society whether they are happy with that. And this results then in a new loop for the model. We will build on the skin model, which has exactly this structure. We can update on this new realm. We have agents that work with keens, and we will use these keens to implement cultural value patterns and these other scores then coming from the dimensions of the Hofstede model, and will adapt this. What are the outputs and inputs here? The input comes from the case studies, quantitative and qualitative data in these case studies. And output is, for example, the distribution of state benefit social services in the chosen domain to potential recipients and the felt justice of this distribution. These will be the output patterns. Why is simulation a good idea? I will close on this now. All what I told you so far about this very big project is that we need a method that can deal with many things at the same time and can work with many inputs at the same time. And complexity is on the upper end of the list. I just provided some dimensions where agents and contexts will differ in our case studies. And this is a lot. You need a model that can capture this amount of complexity and implement frameworks that fit to that. So we will do that with complexity using Hofstede's cultural dimension theory. Gert-Jan has already done some ABMs with these cultural dimensions and with these scores. It seems to work pretty well. Then we need a model that can work with individuals where people matter, their values, their perspectives, their heterogeneity. So ABM is here the method of choice. And then it is that in these conflict-prone areas, it is very important to have a method where you can test out solutions which you can easily discard before implementation. And this is a part where simulations at the safe spaces will work in this participatory modeling approach. It will be a playful way to explore solutions which might harm individuals very much when they would have been implemented right away. Then, of course, simulation can do participation. It is a huge participatory enterprise, this project, because you need to engage all these non-scientists in modeling activities. And there are approaches, you know very well, the companion modeling approach, for example, to do that and to look at team cognition. Iris Lorscheid has done nice studies on that, how solutions emerge in a team, in a participatory cooperative context. And we will use for our model these approaches to look at these discussion contexts to include stakeholder perspectives in the policy modeling area. And of course, simulations are very good when it comes to innovation, because in a way you can use simulations as construction sites for technological solutions. Our scenario simulations will provide requirements for good AI that is context and value sensitive for the different areas we have investigated. And the component, empirical research, social simulation, the third component in our project is an experimental lab infrastructure led by the computer scientists, where these suggestions for AI characteristics in the algorithms will be implemented in a kind of Fab Lab, living lab environment. So simulations also work as input for technology production in our side. And of course, simulations can do future. It is all about future. We had this nice discussion yesterday about prediction. In this context, I would rather speak of weak prediction. We use simulations for, and it is very embedded, as you see. So it is not a straightforward prediction tool that is put on the table. It is part of a huge enterprise, so to speak, like an embedded simulation in empirical research, in stakeholder interaction, in technology production. Simulation is a component, a critical component. And the issue is that it fits very nicely as a interface for all the different parts of the project. So it can do complexity, context, values, innovation, participation, future. This is the landscape we have to deal with, and we need all methodological armor, so to speak, in terms of empirical research, in terms of interactive and participative methods, and simulation is embedded in that for better AI, for technology production, where social simulation, in my eyes, is a key technology, not only for what artificial intelligence will mean for future societies, but also for issues like climate change, energy transition, migration, wherever you have these complex challenges where many stakeholders are involved and where you have complex dynamics with context and value big in the center. I think that this is the kind of machine to create that you will have an output in the end where simulation has been key to promote it and to create it. So these are my last 2 slides. I think what we have already done in this project is we have finalized the planning grant, which was funding for 9 months to put together the research program, to put together the consortium, and to describe the case studies in the case study countries. We have also done a little feasibility study, whether this huge framework will really work. We chose a little tiny issue and did the demonstrator. And we developed the first ideas for the IBM, submitted the full proposal, and in the moment we are waiting for the outcome. We added a Corona module like everybody else on specific public service provision under Corona conditions, which is again a further pressure on the system. And you see that there's a huge thing left to do, namely the actual project, which will hopefully run next year and run for 3 years, where we then have to do that, not only for a tiny demonstrator, but for the whole fleshed out framework. Now, there are lots of open questions, of course, whether this can really work and whether there are outreach and rollout opportunities for other such like societal challenges, and what will be the role of simulation? Can it help to synchronize social dynamics and technological development? Is it really good for that? Does all this work, these network laboratories for innovating societies, that they deal with complexity by simulation? So that's the question we have to find out. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Petra, for a very comprehensive presentation, and obviously good luck with your funding. We have 3 questions from the participants. Ahit, could I please ask you to ask your question?
So, hi, thanks Petra for the talk. I was just wondering, you know, it's kind of, we have all these kind of military funded AI, and they may end up in disastrous situations. Do you see any obstacles to reach to kind of global AI principles? Of course, context and culture would be one, but in your efforts, did you see a kind of obstacle to reach there?
Yeah, that was one result of the planning grant. Actually, we first thought that we just support these global AI initiatives by an agent-based model. That was the first idea we had. And then we looked at different implementations, and we saw that there's a huge variety of AI in use and a huge variety of acceptance and of support. There were, for example, there were US American cities opting out of AI assessment because there was a coalition between lawyers and citizens saying to government, no, we don't want this. We don't want AI to decide on public service provision. And there were big American cities saying no to that. And other contexts happily supported the idea, like for example, Estonia is a front runner in Europe promoting digital solutions, and even the man on the street support having AI for public service distribution. So a big variety. To have a kind of global canon on what is ethical or what is not ethical, what can be allowed or not allowed, what is desired or not desired, is very, very difficult if you do not hear the context-specific approach, if you do not respect culture and values. So I doubt that just with some high-profile abstract statements, you can really govern AI worldwide. You have really to look at detail and do it for specific value context, what people in specific value dimensions think what is their desirable future.
And do you have some hope that this kind of, at the moment we have clear, this is like European Commission level and others in UK, someday come up to a kind of non-proliferation for like what we had for nuclear weapons before?
Yeah. I think they will come up, sure, with something, with a kind of guidelines, let's say 10 sentences on what is good ethical AI. But you cannot break this down then into the algorithms, yeah, that they include the values of the people. This you need to do in combining empirical cultural research, cultural studies, and modeling for potential desirable futures in these societal contexts, then you will have a chance to break it down into the algorithms and look what kind of value is supported by what algorithmic structure. In the moment, that is the big problem. Yeah, they all talk about open and transparent AI, but how a certain value approach is mirrored in an algorithm is a complete opaque thing. And a lot of work from scientists need to be done to really have some more than golden policy paper talk on ethics of AI.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions and 5 minutes, so I guess it depends on how quickly Petra can answer them. Harko, could you please voice your question?
Yes, thanks, Petra. It was an interesting presentation. I do hope that my PhD student will finish her work before you get into her waters. It's quite close. I was a bit surprised by the use of living labs, because to me, living labs usually are used to look at users in an environment in which they are aware of what's going on, and it's not public service, it's individual service. Whereas in public service, it's people who are not sure that what's going on and they don't see the AI. So I'm a bit surprised by the use of that in this assessment project. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, we look at lab contexts where AI then is actually produced in situ, in this context, where people come together and they not only discuss, but they co-create this in an environment which is not apart from their everyday world, but close to their experience settings.
Okay, thanks. Then it was the use of the term that confused me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stefan, could I please ask you now to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the topic and the idea, really great. I'm just wondering, because by listening to that, it seems that the model, the ABM, the agent-based simulation model that you are going to develop seems to be very complex, because it contains components like knowledge, values, economics, environment. Individually, it's already scary to me. I probably will run away. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah, good thing is that we can rely on an existing model. So it is not a starting from scratch. The model we will use is the SKIN model, Simulating Knowledge Dynamics for Innovation Networks. So this, as the name says, is already about knowledge, about innovation, and about networks. And whenever these three components come together, knowledge, actors, networks, you can use the SKIN model. It is a platform and it can be easily adapted. What will be actually a challenge, and there you are right, is to include the cultural dimension in that. And I'm very happy that there is pre-work done in that domain as well. I mentioned Gert-Jan Hofstede's work on implementing cultural dimension in agent-based modeling. And he did that very nicely and very successfully. So I'm grateful to have such a forerunner. This will need to be combined with the existing SKIN model and of course a lot of more. Yeah.
Thank you. I can see Stefan is satisfied with the answer. We have literally 1 more minute until the next session starts. Petra, would you like to add something?
No, I try to be as short as possible.
You were.
Yeah.
Then thank you so much. I hope the session was provided you with enough feedback, and I think that's it's a very timely project that you guys are applying for, and we honestly do not know what are going to be the effects of those algorithms governing our lives. And I think a lot of social work needs to be done there. So I'm super excited that social scientists together with IT people are working on that. So yes, again, good luck with your funding, fingers crossed. And thank you all for participating in the session.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.